All right, the day has finally come. Start tearing the Land Cruiser down, getting the new axles in and new suspension. Been looking forward to this for a long time. So step number one, I need to take some measurements where the axles are right now, you know, as far as front to rear, ride height, all of that. I want to get that all measured up so I know where I'm headed with the new stuff. I'll get that all measured and marked up, and then we can start tearing it down. All right, so we got it up in the air, got tires off, getting ready to start taking things apart. You can see here I've got my measurements, so I know from that line to the center line of the axles, 19 inches. I know my front to rear center line of the axles right here, and I've also got my pinion angle on there, so I can recreate that. So that'll give me a baseline of where everything's got to end up when it all goes back together. So my first step in tear down here, I'm going to go in and pull all my skid plates out so I've got access to everything else that I need to pull off. So I'll go ahead and start getting those pulled down. Alright, so skid plates are out. In the process of doing that, I also discovered that one of my transmission mounts is broken. Wonder when that happened. So I'll have to fix that up too. Probably reinforce that a little more than it is right now. But fortunately, there's another one on the other side over there, so nothing got damaged by that, but we'll just have to fix it up. All right, so I went ahead and pulled the axles and suspension and everything out of it. So got all the old and crusty sitting on the ground now. So now there's a few more parts I need to pull off. Basically, I'm gonna have to cut off the spring hangers in the front, pull the steering box. Thinking the rear, I'm gonna go ahead and just cut off the old link mounts. I'm gonna wind up redoing those with something a little better. There's some more frame cleanup from some old link mounts that are still on there. So it's just time to get the frame cleaned up and ready to go before I start putting all the new stuff back in. Alright, so in continuing with the teardown, I went ahead and pulled the front bumper off because I think I've made a decision here that I'm going to cut the frame right about here. So instead of having this hump up and come back down to the leaf spring mount, since it no longer is going to need to do that, I'm saying cut it here. I'm probably going to run some 1 3/4 tube out around, build a front bumper out of that. I'll have to redo a bunch of my fender mounts and that sort of stuff, but I think that's just the better way to do it here. So yeah, that's going to be upcoming, and for now I think I'm just going to continue on getting rid of all the old leaf spring mounts and the old link mounts that I'm going to be redoing. So get going on that. Alright, so here's the aftermath of today's session of cutting and grinding and all that sort of fun stuff. So I got the front of the frame cut off to get that rebuilt. I've got all the old spring hangers and link brackets and everything cut off. So now it's just a matter of grinding that all down smooth. So I have to Did find on here we've got some cracks coming around where this tube is, going across the tube there, so I'll have to grind those out, weld them up, make that all back to being good and strong. But another little crack on the other side as well. But yeah, I guess it's kind of to be expected from all the years of use this thing's had. So once we get this thing all cleaned up, it'll be time to start building back up. All right, well, I finished cleaning up the frame, got everything ground down, added a plate here where the shackle hangers used to be. So I think I've got everything kind of where it needs to be to start setting up links and getting this front axle mounted. So I kind of rolled the axle housing here underneath, kind of centered up, pulled the steering knuckles and ram and everything off of it just to make it a little lighter and easier to deal with. While I have got it down here too, I also went ahead and tacked on the link mounts. It's kind of only one place where they're going to go. So now I just got to figure out where my upper link bracket and Panhard bracket are going to go, and start seeing how all this stuff fits in here. So I'll get started on that. I'll lower this thing down onto the axle and see what it looks like. All right, here it is where pretty much full bump's going to be. So looking like I got quite a bit of room to work with. Should be plenty of room to get the Panhard bar to slide through there. Actually, I think I'm gaining clearance between the pinion yoke and the exhaust. There's a big old dent here in this exhaust where the old pinion yoke hit it at full bump. This thing's moved over far enough now. I've got clearance for it to go by. So everything's looking pretty good. So now I'm just going to figure out how my upper link bracket's going to sit on here. Yeah, it's all seems to be working out. We'll see how long that lasts. This is the front plate for my upper link brackets. So I made a cardboard version of it so I can kind of see how it's all going to sit. Cereal boxes work great for this. So the plan is it's going to sit in there something like that. And so I should be able to weld it to the truss as well as down here onto the housing as well. Should make it good and strong. So I just got to cut that little notch off of the steel one and should sit right up in there. And then we can start figuring out how the rest of it's going to sit. And that should give me plenty of room to the frame so that as it articulates, it shouldn't come over. Plenty of room for hardware. See what we get. All right, so I got this plate cut to fit around the diff. I also, when I put it up on there, made this blue mark here off of the truss so I know where the side plates for this have to fit. So they'll land on top of the truss and get welded onto it as well as welded on here. I already went ahead and tacked this one on here just so it's kind of in place. So I'll get this assembled up and then I can get it kind of clamped onto the axle and see how it all fits. One thing that I do like to do is I make these little shim pieces that go on here. So when I'm assembling everything, when I weld this together, this will give me about 10 thousandths clearance between the joint and the brackets so that everything just kind of assembles together a little easier when you actually go to put it together for the final time. So yeah, of course now it's going to want to fight me a little bit, but get these in their notches and then that'll go in there. Here we go. Also, when I'm putting everything together the first time too, I just use some regular non-locking nuts. Just makes it a lot easier than just squeeze them down kind of finger tight, and makes it so it holds everything in place. And I can get these plates tacked the rest of the way on. I'll just tack them through the slots here and then stick it up on the axle and see how it fits. Alright, so that's where that upper link bracket's going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing tacked on there. Then it'll be time to start figuring out where the Panhard bracket's going to go up here. Alright, that should be good enough for now. Definitely don't want to get too much welded on these things before you actually know that any of this is going to work. Spent too much time cutting stuff apart to make that mistake again. So I wound up modifying this Panhard bracket a little bit. It used to be bent like this one, but went and put it in the press and flattened it out. And now it's going to wind up sitting up here about like this. You can see I've got it marked. I'm going to cut that off, and then that'll butt up against the side of this bracket, and I should be able to weld this all the way down as well as to the truss, and then I'll figure out where this one needs to go to the outside of it. But that's going to put my Panhard pretty much right where I want it to be, right in here. Get it up fairly high so I've got good stability out of it, and it should still be able to clear underneath the frame, hopefully. We'll find out, I guess. Alright, so I got this inner plate tacked on here. Now I've got the heim and everything on the outer plate. I'm going to stick it on real quick, see what it looks like. So you can see this isn't quite making it over here to hit on the axle where I want to, so I'm making a little bit more bend right here. And I think with that, I'll probably grind that off too, but I should be able to get this outer plate on there too once it's all put together. Keep the stability in all of this the way it's supposed to be. So we'll go and throw that in the press and put a little more bend on that and see how that looks. Got a little more bend on that. Take it over and see what it looks like. Alright, so I got this thing kind of assembled on here. It's hitting pretty good right here, but I've got nothing to weld to over here. So I think what I'm going to do is probably cut this a little shorter here, put a little bit more bend on it, and that should give me a better weld up onto these other brackets here, make things a little stronger. And then with the plate on the back side of this, that'll attach back onto the truss and should make this thing good and strong. Okay, so I got this cut off on the bottom, bent in a little bit more. It's just about where I want it to be. I can get up into here to weld, I can get to here to weld, so that should work out pretty well. And I got a little more to grind on this, and that'll fit on there just about right. And while I've got it right here, mark that, or I can cut that off to fit that angle a little better. Or actually, now that I'm looking at it, the way that sits on that inner C, I like it just like that. So I think that's about perfect. It's weird because that almost never happens. Alright, so we got this thing all fitted together and it's looking pretty good. I'm not going to weld on this or this right now just because I want to be able to weld the seam between this bracket and this bracket fully and then grind it all out and have it smooth. So I'm going to leave these off for now. This one's basically going to be locating where everything's at. So once I pull the axle out to weld everything up fully, then I'll get these all attached. But until then, this is kind of what we're looking at. It's actually all coming together pretty well. I like it. Now we can put together the frame side upper mount. So we'll just kind of bolt it all together here. Put the bolt in, the joint will get installed. I've got my little cardboard shim. Put that on there. That. And then I usually keep around some regular non-locking nuts. Makes it a little easier on these. You can just put them together with finger tight. You can feel the joints get snugged up in there. That'll hold everything exactly where it needs to be so this thing can get tacked up. Alright, now that I got the axle side link mounts pretty well figured out, time to start working on the frame side, at least on the lowers. So on these, what I found is that the joint doesn't want to fit in there. These things are kind of overbent just slightly. So in order to take care of that, get a little machinist jack, which if you don't have any of these, get some. They're great. Work for all kinds of stuff like this where nothing else is going to fit in to do what you need. So just stick that in there, put a little bit of tension on it, and now that fits in. That's just a tiny bit of clearance, so the thing will fit in there, and then when you tighten the bolt up, it'll tighten down on the joint. So now we'll put this skid plate on here, and once I get that tacked on, it'll hold the thing where it needs to be, and then I can go ahead and start working on getting these set up on the frame. Alright, with that tacked up, now I can get in here and pull this jack out. Maybe. Yeah, of course that's going to make it a little more difficult. Alright, well, after some struggles caused by my own lack of planning, got the jack out of there, and now the joint fits in there just like it's supposed to. So now I can go ahead and weld these up fully, and then they'll be ready to install on the frame after I get 3 more of these done. Alright, and just like that, all my frame side link mounts are all welded up, ready to go. So now I can start mocking up at least the fronts onto the frame, see where they've got to go, see what the next problem I'm about to cause myself is. So I've decided on about a 40-inch link for the lowers is going to be about right. No real reason, it just seems like it's going to work out pretty well. So that puts the upper link mount right to about this line. So we're going to take our bracket and we'll get it clamped on something like that, kind of get it fine-tuned and see how it looks. Alright, there we have it clamped on. It's pretty much the position it's going to go in. Look up here, you can see I've got it angled out so that it's pointed a little more towards the axle end, so they'll be somewhat triangulated. Not that that really does much in a 3-link, but anyway, that's pretty much how that's going to go. So I think I'm going to throw the joint in here. I can kind of see how it all might start to look. All right, so running a straight edge along between the two ends of the link here, trying to make it so I've got the joints running the direction they're going to run, pretty much pointed at each other, really. Just kind of eyeballing it in there is close enough. But now I've got them basically pointed at each other. I can get a measurement from end to end that the tube needs to be. And I should be able to just go ahead and cut 2 of them, since the other side should be the same. Or, well, it's going to be the same now, since that's the way I'm going to make them. Then we get that done, I can kind of stick it in here and see how it looks. Get the other side set up, and then I can work on the top link. Alright, so I went ahead and slid the tube onto the ends. So this is pretty much what it's going to look like. I also went ahead and tacked this end of the link bracket, so this is kind of locked in place now. Just make it a little easier to get things fine-tuned. Liking the way everything's coming out so far, so I think I'm going to go ahead and tack the tube onto the bungs. So I'll kind of get that locked in place, and then we'll go ahead and repeat the process on the other side and see how that comes out. And just like that, I've got the driver's side link in. So now time to start working on the upper link on the passenger side. I got the upper link mount clamped in place. It's kind of in a position where with the link bolted into the bottom hole here and in the top hole at the axle, it should put that link pretty good and flat at ride height. So that should get me pretty close to the, I guess, anti-dive numbers I'm looking for. It should be handling pretty decent like this. And here's what it looks like with the tube in place on the link. You can see, like I said, this is sitting pretty good and flat. So what that should cause is, as that goes up, it's going to rotate up and back, and the lower link is going to go up and forward, cause that pinion to rotate kind of back down as it comes up and up as it goes down. If that makes any kind of sense, I guess. Anyway, that's the theory I'm working with. We're going to see how it works out. All right, so with the upper link in place, the only thing left is to get the Panhard bar put in. So in order to do that, because it and the steering box are going to live in pretty close proximity to each other over here, I'm going to have to work on getting the steering box mounted on here, and then I can get a little better idea of where this end of the Panhard bar is going to go. But for now, at least, gotten this far. So with these links, I've got my pinion angle and caster set. So I know those are where they're supposed to be. The axle's kind of sitting centered under the rig right now, so it's right where it's supposed to be, so I can start figuring out this Panhard. So working on the steering box, kind of got it clamped on here. I don't know if I've brought up, this is about a 78, 79 F-150 box. I went with this because it sits outside the frame with the pitman arm going forward. You're being outside the frame gives me a better match to how the Panhard bar is going to sit. So this seemed like the way to go. Where it's sitting here, the front of where I've got the frame cut off is about as far forward as it can go, because once I get the fans and fan shroud on here, they're only a little bit away from where the front of this is going to be. And also when I bring this tube back down, it's got to clear the front of that as well. So this is pretty much far forward as it can go, which is where I want it. Which kind of works out because the pitman arm is going to be about here is where the center of the tie rod end is going to be, which you can see where the center of my ram is. So it'll put it forward of that pretty much exactly the way I want it to be. So this is where it's going to go. The only thing I got to deal with though is up in here. I've got the power steering pump is out of it right now because with it sitting up against the steering box up against the frame, the power steering pump is going to hit it. So I'm going to have to put a spacer in here, move the steering box about a ½ an inch out off the frame. So I think I'm just going to make a ½ inch thick plate that'll sit behind here. Then I can weld onto the frame, and then I think what I'm going to wind up with is some tubes that go through the frame. I don't think I'm going to through bolt it, but I think I'm going to make some tubes that go through that are threaded, so I can just do just straight bolts into the frame and be extended back, probably clear to the other side of the frame, so I'm getting the full strength of it where that box is mounted. And being as how we're using the ram assist on this, there shouldn't be a whole lot of stress on this box or the mounts, but things fail. So I'm going to make things as strong as I can and try and mitigate any future failures. So went ahead and marked where this thing's going to sit on the frame so I know where I'm coming back to. So now I can pull it off of there, and then I'll go see about making up a plate to go behind it, so see how that all fits. And so with the box back off of the frame, and go back to my favorite cereal box template material, I can just put this under here, and I'll just kind of trace out the shape of this, and then I can kind of match it up to what I've got on the frame and see what shape I need my spacer plate to be. Like that. I'll just kind of connect that straight-ish, I guess. I don't know. I suck at straight lines. We'll cut that out, see how it fits on the frame, match it up to where the marks are so I can get the best fit that I can for this thing onto the frame, and then I'll go ahead and use this and cut out a piece of steel and start getting things fit up on here. And here you can see how that template fits up on the frame. I think it's going to work out pretty well. It'll give me this sticking up above here. I'll be able to kind of weld back behind it. This hole is going to be kind of half in, half out of the frame, so I'll just have to notch the top side of the frame. The others are I'm going to be able to just drill through. It should work out. So I think this is the shape I'm going to need for my plate, so I'll start getting that cut out. Alright, so here's the rough cut part, so a little grinding, and we'll see how it fits. And after much grinding and sanding, we've got a part that looks pretty much like what we were after. Matches up pretty well with my template, so now I should be able to take that, probably clamp it onto here, mark where my holes need to go, and then I can go and probably stick this on the frame, get my holes in the frame marked where they're going to have to be off of this, and then I can start working on making up my tubes that are going to get the bolts threaded into them. All right, it fits. Holes line up and everything. That's going to work out. So now I can see about getting this up on the frame, mark the frame, and start figuring out where my holes are in that, and get my tubes made up that are going to go through the frame that the box is going to bolt to. Alright, so now I know where I got to drill the frame. This one up here, it's going to be, I'm going to have to notch out the whole top section of the frame, because the tube this is all bolting to is going to wind up sticking about halfway up through it. So I'll just have to cut a slot out of it basically to make that fit. I got these holes drilled. I also beveled them out so there's a little more room for weld in there, because once I weld the threaded pieces in there, I want to grind this flat, so I want to make sure I got plenty of penetration for that weld. So that little bevel should do it. The other thing I just kind of came to the realization of, I'm going to have to back up a little. So when I put the frame extension tubes in here to bring around and do a front bumper, I wanted to come back to at least about here, which means that I got to get that tube in here before I get this little threaded bung in there. I also kind of want to plug weld these things in. I think this top one, if I just plug weld it from the top, I should be fine, but I'm definitely going to have to get this bottom one in and get the hole through it so that that threaded bung can go through that tube as well. So in order to do that, I need to pick up a piece of tubing, and I'm going to have to put a slight bend in it, because this surface here is not parallel to the ground. It's at about 2 degrees, so I want to put a little bend in it so that the tubes coming out here come out good and flat. So I'm going to get my bender set up and see if I can do that. All right, so I've got my 2 degrees-ish of bend put in that tube. By looking in through this hole, I can see that this end of it is sitting down on the bottom of the frame. As you can see, that thing's sitting there coming out dead flat. So the bottom of the frame is also sitting dead flat, so that's kind of my reference to everything. So that should work. So I just need to figure out how I'm going to put a 3/4 inch hole offset in that piece of tubing. So that should be fun. I'm also going to drill another hole back here that I can plug weld both sides of that tube. And I think on the top one, I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'll be able to put a plug weld through here, and then I think I'll also drop one down through the top. So I'm not going to worry about anything behind that steering box plate. I think that should work out by the time everything's welded up out here and everything gets tied together. So, and these 1 3/4 tubes are just really kind of a bushing because I'm going to wind up with 1.5 inches stuffed up inside them to come out and finish out my front bumper. So don't need too much of it sticking out. This little bit should do just fine. I got this tube clamped up in the mill, so hopefully I can have everything be pretty rigid here. I'm going to come down and center drill it first, and then what I may end up doing, since if I can get it center drilled and everything stays where it's supposed to be, then I'm thinking a 3/4 inch end mill to come in and finish off that hole. It's about the best idea I've got at this point. If I had a little annular cutter that would do that, that would be ideal, but I don't have one of those, so we're going to do this instead. Alright, since that first side went pretty well, and this is a center cutting end mill, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can just drop it through the other side without doing a pilot hole for it, see how that works out. Well, it's cutting it, so I'm going to keep going, and unfortunately I have this thing clamped directly to my table, so I got to be real careful when I break through I don't scar into the table. I'm going to go up a little bit just to make sure I got enough travel. Well, I think we're pretty much through, at least close enough that I can finish the rest of it off by hand. Just don't want to drop into my table, so I'm going to pull it off and see what we got. You can see here I pretty much stopped just in time. It's just starting to poke through the bottom side, so I should be able to peel out that little piece by hand and probably just file the hole to shape and should be good to go. A little fine tuning with the grinder. I've got it to where I can pass this rod all the way through. It meets up with the center of the hole on the back side, so it's kind of exactly where I need it to be. This is what I'm going to wind up making the threaded bungs out of, so that's going to be my next step here, I think. Actually, I think what I'm going to do first is I'll drill the hole here so I can plug weld this tube in, so that the tube will be set in place exactly where it needs to be, and then when I go to set those threaded bungs in, everything should just drop in place. Now with this tube tacked in here now, I can go ahead and pull this out, and we'll go use this to make up these 3 threaded bungs, and then work on getting them in. So I've got one on each end done here. So I'm going to take this over to the chop saw and I'll cut them off at 2-inch lengths, and then I can do the third one. And I can see about cutting the frame where the third one's got to go. So well, my battery died, so I wasn't able to film it, but I went in and I got tacks on the backside of my threaded bungs. I kind of tacked my plate on here for temporary, and then just found some bolts that aren't quite long enough and got the box held in place to see how it all works out. I also kind of stuck the power steering pump in there to see how it's all going to fit. So everything's clearing by a little bit, except for the return line for the power steering pump. It's just kissing one of these bolts on the box, so I'm just going to have to bend it a little bit, get it out of the way. But other than that, everything fits just kind of like I hoped it would. So get some longer bolts and get everything welded up on this, and then we can kind of get things a little more permanently mounted and start moving forward with that Panhard bar and see how it's got to fit. Since everything's fitting in here like it should, I think I'm going to go ahead and just take the steering box off, pull the plate off, and go ahead and start welding up those threaded bungs and start getting everything kind of finalized in here. Okay, so now I'm just going to hit the back sides on these and I'll grind this all down flat and I'll be ready to stick that plate on. And went ahead and bolted the steering box back up onto the frame and stuck my kind of mock-up pitman arm on there too, so I know where everything's going to be. So now I can take my Panhard bracket and kind of figure out where it's going to be. I want it as far forward up into here as I can get it and still have clearance to the pitman arm. So I think I'm going to go ahead and take this and probably cut right down through here and cut this whole chunk here off. And it should let it sit up against the frame and kind of over against where the steering box is at. And so with that cut out, we're getting a little closer to where I want it to be. You can kind of see that front edge is hanging down because of the way the frame is angled right there. So it looks like I need to cut about 3/8 of an inch off of that notch right there. And that should get both of them sitting up against the frame pretty well. And after some more cutting and trimming, this is kind of what we've come up with. I'm not sure I like it. And I'm not sure what else I'm going to do. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to think on this one because I just don't like the way this is coming out. I think we can do something better, but I'm going to have to think on it and see what I can come up with. Well, after looking at this thing for a little while and doing some thinking and trying to figure out what I'm going to do, I've decided I don't like this at all. So I'm not going to use this. So instead, I got this that goes up inside the frame. So it'll wind up in here. I can actually probably get it up a little further forward, but I am going to cut it to angle out so I can get as much length on this Panhard bar as I possibly can. So we'll go ahead and start working on getting this thing cut up, see what we can make fit. All right, well, I got this thing cut out and notched to fit, so I can bring it up and it should go on something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and tack that on there and check my clearances and see how. So with that Panhard bracket tacked in there, I'm going to go ahead and drop things down to where we're pretty close to full bump, see how everything's clearing. All right, so here it is, pretty close to what full bump is going to look like. So, like I said, I think by the time I get this cut off, that's going to be clearing fine. The problem I'm running into now is you can kind of see where the steering arm is there on the passenger side knuckle compared to where, you know, about in here is where the tie rod end on the drag link is going to come to by the time I get my pitman arm built. So where that's going is running right across the top of that ram, which is a bit of a problem. But right now this axle at ride height is sitting about an inch further forward than it used to. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'll suck these links back an inch, move the axle back to where it was originally, and I'll see how everything starts to look then. I think if I do that, that's going to give me enough room that everything should clear. Barely, but it should clear. And here it is with the link shortened up by that inch. You can see no longer a gap there. I still got to adjust that upper link, so that's going to change, but like I said, this is going to get cut off somewhere, so that shouldn't be a problem. But it's going to make it a little easier here by the time I have tie rod end here. I'm going to keep this up as high as I can, and I think I'm going to wind up using some offset tie rod ends so it'll stick that drag link further out. It should clear everything on that ram. So yeah, it's tight, but so far everything looks like it's going to work. You know, it's all fitting up in there, and so I think this is, I got it moved up to the top here, just kind of seeing how it's all going to fit, but I think it's probably going to wind up going in this hole here, so it should clear underneath the frame right there with no problem. I may have to put a little notch in it, but that's not a big deal either. So yeah, all coming together, so I'm going to keep plugging away at it.